Hello.
Treasure. Everyone wants it, everyone needs it. It's a trope that's been popularized since at least Treasure Island, and if not that, then it's a concept that fuels our wildest dreams. What would happen if we found a buried or hidden treasure worth millions, billions, or even trillions of dollars? What if said treasure could be found on the back of
the Declaration of Independence?
Seems like a crazy idea, and John Turtletaub is even crazier. He said, hell yeah, I'll do it. Chances are it didn't go down like that inside the Disney offices, but in my mind it makes sense. Putting a treasure map on the back of one of the most respected and adored documents in American history seems like an insane idea, because it is. However, with the right amount of adventure, fun, action, a little bit of romance, Nicolas Cage, and just the right sprinkle of history, you get an epic concoction.
Oh, come on!
National Treasure is one of those series that made me glad to grow up in the time I did for movies. It's lived for 2 decades, and despite the last movie having come out in 2007, I think this series is just as strong as it was when it was released. In 2 movies, it grossed over 800 million worldwide, and here I am, in the year of our Lord 2025, talking about this franchise. It feels almost like a fever dream talking about National Treasure nowadays. In the department of action adventures with a touch of mystery and thrills, and a tad of history for movies, there hasn't been a whole lot that has actually kept me interested. The recent Indiana Jones was better than Crystal Skull, and Uncharted certainly was. But aside from those 2 movies, I can't really think of anything else in movie form that fits that criteria. Those 2 examples didn't really even cover what National Treasure accomplished with even just its first installment. The art of action and adventure seems kind of lost in recent years, and I say that specifically from the adventure standpoint. We are most certainly not short of great action films. The Mission Impossibles are all fantastic. I can't get into Avatar, but I know people love those. The Dune movies are pretty good, and what else is there? Any movie with either Kevin Hart, Ryan Reynolds, or Dwayne Johnson playing the exact same character? I don't know, that just doesn't do it for me. Sure, you have a Netflix movie that hits the spot every so often, like that Damsel movie, that was pretty cool. But what else is there that totally quenches that thirst? Well, we have to go back. Getting a movie done in Hollywood isn't always easy, especially not with Disney. Just look at however many Star Wars movies there have been or have not been confirmed. Please, Lucasfilm, give me a Star Wars movie. I'm dying for one. I've covered it on this channel before with Pirates of the Caribbean, where Disney decided to throw a why not out there and see what happens. But that's not exactly a normal occurrence, especially not for Disney. For a movie that came out in 2004, one might expect that production began in 2002, maybe even 03. But with National Treasure, we have to go back to 1997. To no one's surprise, a script started in 97 was much different than the one finished in 04. I'm not gonna lie though, when I first started writing the script for this video, I expected a really deep backstory. Like the writers were deeply invested in conspiracy and thus created the treasure surrounding the founding fathers of the United States. And after thoroughly looking, I didn't find that. The writers Oren Aviv and Charles Segars just happened to co-create a story revolving around finding a treasure. The original concept is just impossible to find. Whether that means they didn't like it or the idea simply transformed around Nick Cage, I'm truthfully unsure. But what they inevitably created stands the test of time. I'll of course get into both movies and the Disney Plus series throughout this video, but the treasure of this series is just what it is. What I found really cool in my deep dive on this franchise is that it's original. The likely greatest comparison is the Robert Langdon books, which were written by Dan Brown. The main character, Robert Langdon, solves mysteries based loosely on quote-unquote real historical mysteries. Very similarly to what we see in the first National Treasure movie, one of the Robert Langdon books focuses on the secret knowledge of the Freemasons. But they don't necessarily get around to stealing the Declaration of Independence due to a Templar treasure from Egypt. It's in this that I really came to appreciate the uniqueness of the series, and saw that my previously stated grievances with, say, Uncharted aren't necessarily misplaced. National Treasure is one of the many movies I came back to as a child. The adventure, the thrill, the banging soundtrack, Abigail, and well, it's fun. But my longing for more movies like National Treasure exists because no other franchise aside from Indiana Jones hits as close to home. These are semi-modern movies based in our own time, playing with historical mysteries, loosely based on real people and events. It certainly didn't help that my mom and I would visit Gettysburg every other month because, well, I grew up right next to it basically. But I think that's the gold in this series. National Treasure has the historical intrigue of an authentic event, yet it doesn't take itself too seriously. That brings me back to the point I started but trailed off of. National Treasure is the sweet spot of serious and fun, because it doesn't take itself too seriously, but that's not a sacrifice that jeopardizes the integrity of the story they're telling. Here's what I mean. I like history. I am not a self-proclaimed historian at all, but sometimes I like to be charmed by the glamour of history. National Treasure knows how to highlight these little moments of the past and make them shine like stars in the sky. There are scenes in these films and even the show where I get chills just from a line of dialogue. With movies outside of National Treasure, and this doesn't specifically pertain to movies from the last 10 years, you get too serious or too loose. For example, Too Serious is the Napoleon movie from 2023, or the Gettysburg movie from 1993, and these films are great watches. Neither are absolutely historically accurate, specifically Napoleon, but they are enjoyable. However, the underlying problem is how serious they are, and that's where something like Indiana Jones comes in. It's a great franchise. I really did like the most recent installment, but Indy, Lara Croft, and even Uncharted can lose me at their fantasy spectacle. First, it was the Ark of the Covenant, and then it's a 600-year-old knight, then aliens or time travel. National Treasure, though, doesn't go that far out of bounds on either side. And I'm not saying you're bad if you prefer either approach. The point I'm more or less making is that sometimes I love the glamour of history, the adventure of a pirates movie, and the action and humor of, I don't know, a bullet train or what have you. Nothing else really fulfills that for me. And it's quite the treasure that this series presents to its viewers. Before I go completely off the rails, let's get into the place where it all started. National Treasure 1. In case you forgot what happened, here's a brief synopsis. We get a little knighting ceremony with Grandpa before we're transported to Utah. The Charlotte was trapped in the Arctic, and now Nicholascage is leading our triumphant hunt for the glorious vessel. They find it. However, British guy wants to own the Yanks by stealing the
Declaration of Independence.
He blows up the ship, and now Ben Gates must inform the FBI about a plot to destroy the Jedi. It doesn't work, and so they have to steal the Declaration themselves. On the way, they also kidnap Diane Kruger before driving up to Philly, where they lose the Declaration to the mean British guy. As they try to regroup, Ben is found by the FBI. While there, Ian, the British dude, asks that they meet at the USS Intrepid in Manhattan. They do, but Ben is a smart fish and escapes. The groups converge at Wall Street so they can do some insider trading. They then find themselves under Trinity Church and playing with termites. The Brit, not known for using firearms, threatens the Americans with such a weapon. They tell him about Boston and he bounces for some tea as they turn back and find the treasure. It's actually a pretty cool moment filled with 2 fake-outs, which are pretty cool. Now that we all remember what National Treasure, How to Steal a US Document is about, now we can talk about it. This movie perfectly encapsulates everything I was talking about before. National Treasure knows how to be serious without completely tonally spinning you for a loop. I know my last video was Click, the most tonally different movie out in the world probably ever, and we discussed how great that movie is. But when I'm looking for fun, this is the place I want to be. There's these little moments where the serious tone of the movie shows, but it's done in such a lighthearted way that it really feels wholesome. More of the emotional tension lies in the relationship between Ben, Patrick, and John fucking Adam Gates. I had absolutely no clue that Ben's grandfather's name was John Adams Gates. That's absolutely remarkable. And haha, look, Patrick, he's not named after anyone at all. No wonder he never found anything. That's why he's so fucking bitter. Anyways, in the beginning, Ben's little knighting ceremony is sweet.
Freemasons and the family gates. Do you so swear?
And, in the end, when his swear is fulfilled in the treasure room,
behind for us to find and understood the meaning of it. You did it, Ben, for all of us. Your grandfather and all of us.
these scenes aren't completely movie-shifting tones because they're built into the characters, but they feel nice when they come. Make no mistake, these aren't films where you're expecting some insane character development, but every action feels like it comes from the characters themselves. It's perhaps in a movie like this that I actually found a love and adoration for history.
Uses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object. Events are designed to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. People don't talk that way anymore.
I believe that's why movies like Indy, Lara Croft, and Uncharted feel so hollow to me. Don't get me wrong, I adore them all the same, they're fun, but National Treasure makes something unbelievable feel real. The excitement of treasure hunting, not for the purpose of getting the bag, but for the thrill of history, is even more intriguing. Ben's motivations as a character originate from his grandfather, calling him an honorary Mason,
Freemasons?
a knight, and that leads him to stealing the Declaration to protect it. This specific focus in the story adds to the stakes, but also what makes Nicolas Cage so enjoyable in these movies. The stakes are the history itself, and Ben Gates is wholeheartedly unique in the world of treasure hunters. I think that's what makes these movies so fun. That's why I think everything feels so real when you're watching them. Aside from the fact that the ideas and the mystery surrounding each treasure feel real, the characters are all motivated properly. Ben and Abigail are lovers of history. They adore what they're searching for. Riley is your comedic sidekick, but he's also the tech wizard to help the audience stay in tune with what's going on. I think it's in these three leads that gets National Treasure to work as a whole. Any other group of actors probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish what they did in this first movie specifically, and also romanticize historians and history. Watching National Treasure as a kid made me admire people who knew what they were talking about. The thrill of piecing together little moments of history and connecting the dots in live time just gets the heart racing.
Oh, no, wait, stupid. It was firm, it was adamant, it was resolved.
Resolute.
And then twins. Siamese twins, Siam, trade routes between France and Thailand. Well, that's ridiculous. HMS Resolute, a British ship that got lost in the Arctic in the 1800s. It was salvaged by American whalers, then Congress sent it back to England. When the ship was finally retired, Queen Victoria had 2 desks made from its timbers. Voila! Resolute twins.
This ability to make history come alive as Ben rambles through various potential connections is awesome. Like, I wanted to be that as a kid. To know how something ties to something else? I actually did do it in my life once, and it was fucking awesome. I felt like a superhero. It was like an English 11 honors class or something, and it felt like I was in the movies. Long story short, we were reading some book by a British author that I didn't read. I couldn't even tell you the name of the story, but in a class discussion, they mentioned some events, some characters within the book, and it sounded like the East India Trading Company. From the little I knew of that history, I was able to, once the teacher called on me for the first time during the discussion, connect all of it, and he was just as shocked as I was that I was right. And that's my point with National Treasure. History comes alive, and with a sweeping, adoring score by Trevor Rabin, it makes it feel heroic. Ben or Nick Cage as a lead,
Oh, come on!
is what you need for these movies. He's not a superhero Harrison Ford, godly human being, no offense, but no one does it like Harrison Ford. He's not a fighter like everyone else ever. He's literally just a dude that likes history. As he gets into more engagements with Ian's crew, he gets more annoyed, because to him, it's about the history. And I think that's very much the same thing for Abigail. Diane Kruger does such a fantastic job of being wowed by moments of discovery. There's like a gentle but also excited nature about them when they make a step in their progress, and I think it's a great comparison to what we see from Ian at the beginning. Ian is all about getting to the next step to find the treasure, whereas Ben, despite chasing it his entire life, doesn't seem nearly as ready to go after it, especially when it involved the Declaration. Now, Riley is great. Everything he does seems within character. There's a scene from one of the Marvel movies that keeps popping up in my head when I think of Riley, and it's how he's the antithesis of that scene. It's an emotional scene in, I think, Avengers, and Don Cheadle says something like "Cheese whiz"
Cheese whiz?
in regard to Thor being a fat ass, and it kinda takes me out of the scene. My point being, Riley never does something like that. There's not something in the script that says, hey, act out of character to ruin an emotional scene. I'll be honest, sometimes he's a bit over the top for me, but he's never not in character, which is the point I'm making. He's a goofy guy, and we love that for him. Something else that really adds to the charm of the series, but especially something I want to highlight within this first movie, is all the work they do behind the scenes. The shot of Abigail walking in front of the Capitol building was done on site. They closed down, I think it's Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest or something like that, just to get that shot. Or the fact that the actors were actually doing their own stunts for these scenes. Like, for a goofy movie about a hidden treasure, everything feels real, because it is. It's not Tom Holland climbing on crates falling out of a plane. It's real. Hell, they even got experts who work with the actual Declaration of Independence to send them pictures of the back of the document, so that they could make their props for the movie. The genuine love put into these films and the series is why they feel so authentic to the history they cover. Without depending on fantasy to make something feel rational, National Treasure makes realism pretty freaking cool. The extra bit of work on the behind the scenes side of things is why this is such a huge payoff. This doesn't feel so good without having all of those on-site locations and actual love for the history you're talking about. So that's how the sequel starts. Abe Lincoln is fucking dead. The second movie is a 2007 classic, except it's not a classic because it doesn't end with What I've Done by Linkin Park. Mostly kidding, mostly not, Linkin Park's still awesome, but remember how I said I went to Gettysburg a lot as a kid? Well, this movie starts with the Civil War, and the end of it. That had me lit. Little me was amazed by this opening, and whoa, what's that? Another recap? Damn, that was such a clever way to train. National Treasure 2, for those who don't remember, starts off with a rip-off version of the Klan, called the Knights of the Golden Circle. Yes, those guys were actually also a real group, like the Masons. This group is looking to decipher a Playfair cipher, and Thomas Gates is the only guy in the world who can do it. Well, after Lincoln is shot, so is Thomas Gates. This, of course, leads to a great-great-granddaddy pissing contest in the year of our Lord 2007. Wilkinson and the Gates are feuding over stories they heard growing up. But then, after 70 years, Patrick remembers something he hadn't heard or remembered since he was a boy. That leads to them finding a connection to La Belle Lady in Paris. They meet the French police, eat some croissants,
Being everyone's pleasant morning with your buzzing there.
before tripping over to London, UK.
Right here.
Good afternoon, sir. Hello.
Did I mention this movie is hilarious? After breaking into the Queen's desk, they skip the pond to do the same thing in the Oval Office, where they find Joe Biden's ice cream button.
How quickly can you get something done? Like, if you said, I want an ice cream, how quickly would I... That sends an ice cream.
Oh, shit.
Turns out the plank is gone, and by gone I mean destroyed. So when deciding that stealing the Declaration of Independence isn't enough, he kidnaps the president. After aggressive negotiations, they go into the president's book and go to the Black Hills. For anyone who's ever been out there, just know, Crazy Horse is 10 times cooler, and I will die on that fucking rock. I will die on it. Crazy Horse is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, inside of a cool rock, they play with this thing from hell.
All of you, other side!
Back up! Back up!
Once they finish that, they almost drown and find a city of gold. Nightmare stuff. Woo, what a recap. Yeah, this movie is like 10 times funnier than the first one, and I don't know why. It's not like they changed the tone of the movie or anything, but it feels like they let Nick Cage be a little more cagey. It's weird. Having watched all 3 National Treasures pretty much back to back to back, I'm really under the belief that nothing is quite like this series. Whether you prefer the first movie or the second movie is up to you, but National Treasure 2 genuinely sets this franchise up to be a successful trilogy. Like, there's room for a third movie to be born following this, and it hasn't come. And I'm going to say, because you never know how people are going to interpret shit, I'm not slandering this show by saying this. I will talk about it, but these 2 movies really were destined to be completed by a trilogy. Because while I think I prefer the first one to the second one, Book of Secrets feels more comfortable being itself.
Surrender your hand.
I am sorry. I couldn't resist.
It really depends on the day of the week for which of these 2 movies I prefer over the other. But the sequel is so much more of the first one, just toned up. And I don't know how else to explain it other than that. The creators realized the first movie was successful, and they decided, well, why not continue with the focus on history and ciphers and riddles and cool little puzzles? Something that's cool about the first one is the action, but the second one, despite having the car chase, feels a lot less actiony. It tones down the more flashy side of the story and focuses more on the weirder, or if I may say, nerdier side of what's so cool about these movies. I might be just interpreting this wrong, but that's how it feels to me. There are a lot of parallels between this and the first, but Book of Secrets simply focuses on what made the first one so likable. The mystery and location span the seas, and I really do love that this franchise prefers on-location footage instead of working from a small stage. It brings to you the world that Nick Cage is in, and makes some spotty history feel accurate. It's kind of crazy because all the serious tones from the first movie are a lot more present in this one. You've got the whole divorce between Patrick and Emily, not to mention the surprise that it's Wilkinson's hunt for the treasure, hence his slandering of Thomas Gates. The mystery itself is in a family tragedy, but it all leads to a greater treasure. Wow, that's crazy. That sounds familiar to something else. I wonder what it could be. But it highlights these themes more than the first one, while also being funnier. The more I talk about it, I actually might like Book of Secrets more than the first installment, which kind of undoes what I said a minute ago. But while you're angrily typing about not being able to make up my own mind on which I like more,
Because obviously you have a tendency to overreact!
I think that's the beauty of the franchise. Both films are just uniquely themselves. Story-wise, they're different, but fundamentally at their heart, they are fantastical historical stories based in mystery. Something that works great about Book of Secrets is the expansion of the cast. A lot of times, sequels can throw in a ton of extra cast members, but this does just the right amount. Ben's mother, Emily, makes perfect sense. She's directly connected to our main character, while also being beneficial for the continuation of the story. Like, it's cool that she plays a professor at UMD and knows Native American languages. It makes her character a welcome addition. Wilkinson's fine, he's your typical action film villain, but he's not like unwelcome. He and Ian feel different enough, so it's cool, and let's see. Oh, there's the Dick who plays the dad in Modern Family. Oh, and the POTUS! He's pretty cool. Something that I do like about National Treasure is how their MacGuffin becomes the literal president of the United States. That's pretty funny in my opinion. But having the president help them find the treasure and also sequel bait is cool. There are 2 full scenes where Ben is interacting with POTUS. First, when he kidnaps him, and second, when he sees him at the end of the movie. And POTUS always stuck out. He's not a totally terrible dude. He's invested in the history, and you know, that's pretty cool. And out of all the mystical or fantastical things in this series, the most of them is that the fucking president is below the age of 55. That's crazy. Anyways, speaking of the president, he gives us sequel bait. He's the Barbossa walking down the steps in Pirates 2 of this movie.
So tell me, what's become of my ship?
It's the same thing. How about page 47?
There's 47 reasons to be interested.
I don't fucking know. Why don't you tell me about page 47? Cause I wanna know too. Anyways, what else? Oh, the nerdy shit. Let's talk about that for a hot second.
Do you like ducks?
Book of Secrets has like this really cool focus on jumping around in history. A lot of the first movie revolves around revolutionary America. Liberty Bell, Declaration, Benjamin Franklin, and so on. All of which is pretty cool. The sequel involves a Native American treasure which is older than the United States. And so you have Esteban, who is based off a real man named Estevancio, a former slave who explored the American Southwest for the 7 cities of gold, i.e. Cibola. There's Labale, John Wilkes Booth, Mount Vernon.
Oh, well, hello there, sir.
Buckingham's Palace, and Mount Rushmore. There's so much packed into this movie. Like I said, the movie takes all the nerdy goodness of the first one and just amplifies it. I know the myth of Cibola is just that, but man, these movies make me want to get into treasure hunting. It sounds so fun, it makes me want to go back to school and add history major to my already useless music degree. And that perhaps is the best part about these movies. They're, for me, a connection back to my inner child. I adored these movies. They're awesome. A little fake, but real enough to feel genuine. And that means more than anything to me. Oh boy. So, you've watched me glaze this franchise for the last 25 minutes. Just like I did with Click, Real Steel, Transformers Prime, Megamind twice, Kung Fu Panda, and Planet of the Apes. And you're thinking, the buck stops here. After a full year of PPC glazing movies and shows and ideas, and it ends at this moment. Well, you'd be wrong. I'll do my little recap for this show, but I'll be honest, it's not terrible. And yeah, that's a great compliment, but I genuinely enjoyed Edge of History. Is it the greatest thing I've ever seen? No. Is it greater than either of the movies? Also no. But doesn't that mean it's horrible? Well, no, it doesn't. I went into the show in January of 2025, and honestly, thank Cageous Nick I did. If I had watched this show in 2022 and made this video, I'd get crucified.
Overreact!
When I first started watching, I had low expectations. Not because of the show either. I liked the trailer, it looked fun. But I had also forgotten about said trailer by the time I started watching. All I knew is that a certain crowd on YouTube was very unhappy, so I took what they said with a grain of salt and went in. I'll be honest, the first 2 or 3 episodes were hard to get into. I think because I didn't realize until the end of that this show was made for a different demographic. I'm just a little older than the target audience, and that's not a bad thing. It's like going into Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures and being surprised it's not action-packed. Like, duh, it's for a different age group, you fucking maniac. Does that mean I'm giving an excuse based on its target audience? No. I happen to like things, you know that. Some things I don't, but I enjoyed Edge of History. Jess was a great lead character, and she carried the show for me. But the mystery, the story, the added history, it was fun. The show does suffer from some filming locations not all being on site, and it also does suffer from some of the direction. I don't know if this will make sense, but bear with me for this. It feels like the actors were directed to act younger than they were. The comparison I told my friend before writing this video was, it felt like 13 Reasons Why without the bathtub scene. In other words, the actors were all in their 20s, but acting like they were in high school. But a lot of other comments about this show seem pretty superficial or just whiny. They are weak points, and they happen more than they should, but the show itself is satisfying to watch through. Like, here's an example. In National Treasure 2, there's this scene.
Being insensitive to minority issues.
Imagine if that came out today. That's all I'm gonna say. Actually, it's not. Some jokes in Edge of History work. Some get me to get a little chuckle.
I'm glad I found out now and not on our Hawaiian honeymoon.
I hate the beach.
Oh.
I'm gonna say it. There's just too much sand. It's everywhere.
I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough, and irritating. And it gets everywhere.
But you know what I do as a 24-year-old without a fully formed frontal cortex when I hear a joke that doesn't land? I get over myself. Just a little, okay, then move on. I don't know why everyone needs to get on the internet and whine about a joke that lasts for all of 3 seconds in a show. Kinda weird. So let's do a recap, and then I'll talk about Edge of History and National Treasure 3 or something. We start with Sadusky. Yeah, the guy talking about the secret mystery involving Emperor Montezuma's invasion of the Aztec Empire. We get Sadusky's rundown of the whole mystery, and then an intro into Jess's father, who is finding one of these relics. We learn of someone called Salazar, and he's the bad guy. Then we meet Jess. As we go on throughout the show, we learn of her interest in mysteries and how she's an immigrant and so forth. Sadusky also fucking dies in the first episode, which is a little wild.
Do you like ducks?
Through the first 4 episodes, we get to know our main cast, which I'm not going to get super into. I like Jess, she's dope. Oren and Liam have a couple moments. And Agent Ross, love her, she's awesome. But overall, it's a massive group compared to the original small cast. Billy, the villain, is also introduced. Very similarly to Ian, she apparently has infinite resources and the magical private plane. I initially didn't care for Billy, but she grew on me. Every episode has a couple mysteries, and then in episode 4 we meet Riley. He and Jess hit it off at Sadusky's funeral. Kind of weird place to do it, but Ben and Abigail also have a dog, so they're basically married. The German Shepherd is named Charlotte. From interacting with the FBI in Baton Rouge to visiting the Alamo, or the Mayor's Ball, there are genuinely plenty of fun locations. There's some cool tension when we learn that Agent Hendricks from the movies is actually Salazar, and the race to the final location has a couple of deaths and even some puzzles to get into, before of course we get some sequel bait. Now, I know I kind of rushed through this a little, but this is 10 episodes and it's like 8 hours worth of content. I'm not gonna do that. Even if this was my favorite thing ever, I wouldn't have it in me to do a 4-hour video essay about anything, honestly. However, something that I personally think is true, and I'm glad they didn't do it with this series because, hell, I couldn't imagine the Twitter-specific backlash, but a lot of Disney Plus shows would work incredibly well as movies. Don't get me wrong, I like a lot of these shows on Disney Plus. Kenobi was awesome. Acolyte was tons of fun. But both would have been stronger movies, and the same can be said with Edge of History. I liked spending time with these characters. As I said before, it's a show that grew on me as I continued to watch. Each episode I liked more than the one before it, and that was a constant theme throughout my watch.
There's a flock of nuns outside. Stall them. I can't lie. They're nuns.
Though these Disney Plus shows struggle because most of them are movies broken up into parts, aside from like The Bad Batch. More or less, this show really had a cool premise. I liked seeing characters from the original movies have different arcs. I watched National 1 and National 2 following this show, and the immersion didn't change. It was also kind of cool that I was like, oh shit, that guy's a murderer, he killed Sadusky, and yeah, I'm talking about Hendricks being Salazar. I am, because I'm petty, going to counter 2 things that I saw about this show that actually annoyed me a little bit. People whined about ruining Hendricks' character, but he has a grand total of like 5 minutes of screen time in 2 movies. What fucking character was ruined? The second being about the history not being American or revolving around Jess. And remember when I said, the mystery itself is a family tragedy, but it all leads to a greater treasure? The mystery itself is a family tragedy, but it all leads to a greater treasure.
See, I did say that. Very clever.
Yeah. This show has a very similar setup to Book of Secrets, which isn't a bad thing. And also, like Book of Secrets, the treasure is non-US American.
This is going to unlock the Olmec language. It's going to give us incredible insight into pre-Columbian history.
Neither technically are, but calling out some bitchy statements that were dumb that I saw. Back to Edge of History. It struggles at a couple spots, I do agree. I won't fight you there. But it's true to the series, it fits in with the movies. The quality is a little off, and I think generally that's a modern thing with Hollywood, but it fits. It's a sequel that isn't egregious. It just expands the universe. People who love history and have a personal connection to it are at the very core of what makes this franchise National Treasure. And sure, unlike its predecessors, it's directed for a specific audience. I don't think that makes it any less National Treasure though. Again, with Star Wars, are Young Jedi Adventures or Resistance any less Star Wars because of their target audience? No. If you enjoy the franchise as a whole, you'll enjoy the show, because I did. I'm not going to whine for an eon about a joke that didn't land, because I'm a big boy and I eat my greens too. So we've talked about everything that's been released by National Treasure thus far. It's a franchise that thematically remains the same, and quite honestly, one of my favorite comfort franchises, something I realized while writing this video. There's so much nostalgia around it, and that didn't blind me when going into Edge of History. But as I wrote this video, I realized how much I, myself, love these movies. I had considered, briefly, talking about some historical inaccuracies in this series, because each installment is inaccurate in some way historically. But honestly, we're having kind of a good chat here. Why bog it down with something unnecessary? If you want all the historical inaccuracies, pick up a book, or watch another video, cause they have all the answers. I like the movies as is anyways. That though, leads me to my next point, and that's where the road leads from here on out. Do we see Jess and the crew on another adventure? Probably not. Disney canned the show just like Acolyte. Do we see Nick Cage and the OG cast make a return? Potentially. I've said it throughout this video, but especially during the Book of Secrets segment, there was sequel bait for the third movie. Even Riley tells Jess that he and Ben had been working on another treasure for the past decade, which seems like an indication that there's room for it. I know we, as in National Treasure fans, heard Nicolas Cage say that it's very unlikely that another movie gets made with Disney, but there is some semblance of hope, because in 2024, even in August, there were 2 reports that they were working on another movie, one that would maintain Edge of History as the official canon, so not bringing back Hendrix or Sadusky. One of the screenwriters from both movies, Ted Elliott, said that he was working on a script within the canon, wanting to do something different with the FBI than previous installments, especially after Sadusky's death in the show. But he highlights the continued arc of Riley. In the first movie, Riley is the audience, the ask questions by the audience guy. In the second movie, he's written an entire book on crypto history, and knows something that Ben doesn't, that being the President's Book. That also continues in Edge of History, when he and Jess get stuck inside of Sadusky's history room. Elliot mentioned that familiar faces could return, like Dr. Emily or even Ian, and he didn't totally throw out the idea of having Jess show up for the film. All of it's in development at the moment, and I think it's exciting to hope for more National Treasure to return to us. And to that point, I think it would be awesome to see some of the newer people interact with some of the older people. So Ben, Abigail, Riley, and Jess meeting together and working on a treasure, even if it's brief, I think that'd be cool to see. With all that being said though, National Treasure has been a fantastic franchise, and despite Edge of History not getting its sequel, there is hope that a movie can complete the trilogy we've been longing for. It's not impossible, and due to a semi-cult classic fandom forming around this franchise since 2004, there's a chance we could have the thrill of our lives, seeing this series return to the big screen. For all of you, thank you for joining me. If you like National Treasure and me, well, you know what to do.